Welcome to the Autism ADHD podcast. It's the place to be for neurodiversity affirming parents and professionals. I'm your host, the mom neurodivergent therapist. Here we chat about emotional regulation, mental health, social support, executive functioning, learning, and more, all aimed at empowering us to support kids and teens with compassion and understanding. I'm thrilled that you joined me today, and I've got some pretty exciting news to share with you. For those rock star therapists listening right now, I've created continuing education training that is tailor-made for you. Take a deep dive into cutting-edge strategies that you can start using today. The CEs you've wanted for so long are finally here. Go to hollyblancmoses.com/CE training and sign up. You are going to love it. The link is also available in the show notes. Now, if you are a parent or educator listening and you know a therapist or a psychologist that is passionate about supporting kids and teens, I greatly appreciate it if you could pass on this great news. Thanks so much again for your support, and let's get started. Welcome, Elizabeth LeForest, to the Autism ADHD podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
I am excited that you're here. I'm going to introduce you really quick. Elizabeth is an AuDHD woman, and we have gotten to know each other over the last couple of days, and she's amazing. She's a mom, a trauma-informed somatic coach. She supports neurodivergent women navigating anxiety, burnout, chronic illness, and breaking the cycles that keep them stuck in those spaces. So they're able to build the lives that they love, build lives that are sustainable, authentic, and just supportive from the inside out. Another really neat thing about Elizabeth is she's got this background of wellness, creativity, high performance, executive functioning, coaching experience as well. And she spent the last decade helping hundreds of clients rebuild their lives in a way that actually works for them. She has that lived experience, which we all know is important, from severe burnout and chronic illness. Her work now blends the lived experience with deep research and training. And the result of that is this grounded, nervous system centered approach. And it's designed specifically for women who are used to holding everything together while they quietly fall apart. And I think any mom that's listening, Elizabeth, right now, has just said, wait, is she talking about me?
Yeah. Because that's such a common experience in motherhood in general. And then especially for neurodivergent moms is that you've got to keep it together. You've got to be taking care of the kids. You've got to be, a lot of times there's the masking component and the high sensitivity component and fears around being a burden. And like all of that comes into play and you end up just like falling apart mentally and physically, but on the outside, you're still trying to keep it all together. You're still trying to make sure everyone else is taken care of.
Absolutely. There was a mom the other day that I was working with, just this fantastic human. I'm very grateful that I get to work with the people I get to work with. And she was saying how hard it is now to balance all the things. There's so much going on, and filling all the roles and remembering everything. And I said, well, take a step back and just ask yourself, when is the last time that you felt like everything wasn't falling apart or you felt like you weren't completely overwhelmed? And she said, before kids. And I said, makes sense to me because you were already stretched. And then you added kids, and now you have to become their executive functioning like frontal lobes.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot. And I'm glad that we're going to be talking about our own nervous systems. You often hear about emotional regulation for kids. We all
Mm-hmm.
want to know how we can help them, but it actually starts with us. And not
Yeah.
only is this important because of connection and building our lives together, but also our mental and physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're dead on. As so many neurodivergent women are already pushing their capacity just to get through the day, just to meet expectations. And then when you have a kid and those expectations or the demands on your mental capacity, on your mental load increase, the demands on your nervous system increase, the coping mechanisms that were working for them more or less before suddenly start to not be working anymore. That it's not enough. They're not able to push through because they were already pushing through to their limits and now they're past their limits. And a lot of these things that they've used to fit in or to meet expectations for so long are no longer even accessible to them because they get so burnt out, because they are so busy, because they're focused on their kids or what other people are expecting from them. And the result of that is that their nervous system, which was already pretty much fried, tips over into this space of chronic illness, right? They start to experience these different chronic illness symptoms, and then they end up in this whole long experience of trying to figure out what's going on and barely being able to keep it together themselves and still having to show up for their kids. And the thing about nervous systems, you're saying that, a lot of people talk about nervous systems with kids, how important it is to help them regulate, how important it is to help them come back into their bodies in the moment and be able to handle whatever they're experiencing. But if you're a neurodivergent mom who hasn't experienced that themselves when they were a kid, who didn't have that necessarily, even if you had great parents, if you grew up especially undiagnosed, you're gonna have these experiences of not people not understanding what you needed in the moment, of not being able to show up for you in that way, even if they wanted to, even if they had some awareness of what was happening, which most of us don't have that in our families of origin. And so you end up with this kind of intergenerational trauma where your kid gets dysregulated and then you get dysregulated and then you feel shame. And then you're like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I show up for my kid? Why am I expecting my kid to be able to regulate and handle their emotions when even I can't do that in reaction to them? And because you don't have that frame of reference or you don't have that foundation of co-regulation to draw from, it becomes almost inaccessible for you in the moment to actually regulate so that you can then be there for your kid and help them regulate and help them develop that foundation of co-regulation.
Teaching children emotional regulation. And yes, absolutely important. You
Mm-hmm.
should do that. And you hear that term co regulation over and over
Mm-hmm.
again, but nobody really talks about, Elizabeth, nobody really talks about what that means
Yeah.
because it sounds pretty, it
Yeah.
sounds lovely,
Yeah.
but what is it and how do you do it? And I think that we need to dig in more. And obviously, you and I are doing that today, but dig in more about how that is possible. And so many of us, me included, did not have that foundation.
Yeah.
Not you just hold it in, right? Like you
Yep.
did what you had to do to get through that next moment, and that's how you developed. Like that is your foundation. You also recognize, a lot of us, that we want to do things differently,
Yeah.
right? We want things to be different for our child, but it's not this massive jump to the other side that you can even make without doing
Mm-hmm.
this other work, because
Yeah.
then it's just more masking and
Yep.
band-aids.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that yes, co-regulation is vital to child development, right? We know this, and I know that it's talked about, but it's not really talked about what that means or what that looks like or how to access that. And the truth is, most neurodivergent moms are not able to consistently access that regulation for themselves. Because what I've seen time and time again in the clients I work with and within the larger community of neurodivergent moms is that most neurodivergent women are kind of cycling through the different survival states. And that's the primary way that they exist. So they'll cycle through fight, flight, freeze, fawn many, many times throughout the day with very few stops in the land of actually feeling safe in their body. And in order to co-regulate, in order to be present and provide that safe space for their child to feel safe, they have to be able to access that feeling of safety inside themselves. And when you don't have that foundation of co-regulation to draw from, and when you've spent years or decades in various survival states, it becomes difficult to access that even when things are going well, even when things are like everything is calm and the house is clean and all of the things are done and your kid is happy. Even in that point, it can be difficult for neurodivergent women to access the feeling of being safe in their body. Let alone when there's chaos everywhere and your kid is having a meltdown and you're feeling the shame and the pressure and all of, then it becomes almost impossible for most of us. And so the process of nervous system recovery and expansion and building that foundation of co-regulation within yourself, building your tolerance for being present with your body, for feeling safe and good in your body, that takes time and it takes a lot of very intentional work with somebody who understands and knows what it's like to not be able to access that. Because if you're working with a practitioner who doesn't have that lived experience component, and I know you and I have talked about the importance of the lived experience component, oftentimes they don't know where the gaps are. They'll be using words like, oh, you just need to co-regulate with your child. And you do that by remaining calm and staying centered within yourself. But they're telling you to do things that you may not have ever done in your living memory, and you have no idea how to get to that point. And so it's very important to make sure that while you're doing this work, that you're utilizing resources and working with people who have that understanding of maybe where you are and where the gaps are to get you to where you want to go.
It's true. And that takes a lot of work. I'm a psychologist. I do this, and I find it incredibly difficult at times. I like how you described it because it's so true. They're cycling through, and I'm going to say we are
Yeah.
cycling through fight, flight, freeze, and fawn on the regular. And many of us are very stuck in fawn for our survival. We are always talking about survival responses in the kids. Here we have mothers who are experiencing this cycle just like the children are, but we're not talking about the mothers. Yet we expect them to take on not only their own experience,
Mm-hmm.
but all the other experiences of the other humans in their life. And so when you're very stretched, and then you add more humans and you add more responsibility, your mental health that was already just hanging on and your physical health, if you didn't already have physical symptoms before that, you're more likely to experience them when you are just constantly overflowing and you are beyond capacity.
Yeah. And all of that stuff compounds, right? So something that I talk about is a tipping point. So a lot of neurodivergent women kind of cycle in and out of burnout phases. So they'll go into burnout and then they'll be able to kind of come out of burnout for a while, but then they end up going back into burnout. And usually it's worse. And then they're able to come back out of burnout and then they go back into burnout again and it's even worse this time. And what happens is that at some point, you go from being in burnout to tipping past your limits. And what happens is I call it a cascade effect. And so At that point, your autonomic nervous system starts to affect all of these different systems within your body because these systems are not getting the resources they need. In order to resource your body, you need to be in rest and digest, which is a state that most neurodivergent women are not spending very much time in. Even when they're not doing anything, they're not actually being able to access a state of rest. They're still almost in a freeze mode where they're still anxious and they're still thinking about things and, oh, I should be doing this. There's the shame, all of that stuff. They're not actually able to rest and digest and resource their body. And because they're spending so much time in those survival states, being in each of those survival states, it requires more resources from your body. It requires more hydration. It requires certain supplements that are getting used more and just burning through when your body is in an activated state. And so it starts to affect these different systems in your body. And then once one system's affected, it's almost like it puts a band-aid on it by pulling resources from other systems. And so then another system gets affected. And so your body is just like MacGyvering to try and keep going, but it's starting to develop all of these different chronic illness symptoms that you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what's going on in your body. Some people experience that point early on when they're younger. So sometimes it'll hit around puberty, around teens, sometimes early adult years. A lot of high masking neurodivergent women are able to make it to like their 30s or so. And then they experience a complete crash of their mental and physical health. And I find that a lot of times the ones who make it to like their 30s or so are moms who were able to get further with their coping mechanisms. And then they hit motherhood and everything just got exacerbated because they weren't eating frequently, because they were constantly in a state of stress, because they weren't able to rest, they were getting less sleep. And all of these things contribute to their autonomic nervous system not being able to function in the way that it's meant to function.
And when you're feeling like you're constantly in danger
Yeah.
for your whole life and the impact that can have on you, even when you're young, like you were saying, I mean, there are many young girls that are experiencing these chronic illnesses and also like
Hmm.
headaches, GI, all POTS, EDS,
Hmm.
all these different things that they're having to deal with on top of
Yeah.
everything else, right? And then, like you
Yep.
said, there are these other women who may have not been diagnosed or treated
Yep.
because they have pushed so hard for so long. There is nothing left. They've been running on empty and sometimes for decades, right?
Yeah.
And I also think of it like this too, is almost like neurodivergent women, we found ourselves, and I'm talking probably for both of us and a lot of those listening, we were taught to minimize any experience we had.
Yeah.
Like, suck it up, don't be dramatic, you're fine. No one was going to listen to you anyway.
Yeah.
So even if you did have an experience, you started to question your own experience, like, oh, well, I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And all this is happening for them and they don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Well, why would you tell someone? You've tried that before.
Yeah.
You just feel bad. Quit
Yeah.
complaining. Stop being so negative. Nothing's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And so when we learn that at such an early age and we start having these symptoms, it's almost like we tell ourselves that internally, right? I don't have time
Yeah.
for this. I don't even have time to
Yep.
notice that I'm
Yep.
breaking down mentally and physically because I've got to have all these balls in the air. I have to do this and that, and I cannot do one more thing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's hard for women to even admit
Yeah.
something is happening for them, that they are experiencing pain or they're going through this, because, first of all, who wants to admit that? You're also taking a risk in people not believing you.
Yeah.
And it's just that, again, that cycle that just keeps going and
Yep.
going.
Yeah. And an enormous part of the nervous system recovery process is rebuilding that trust with yourself, because that trust from a very young age for neurodivergent women, it is invalidated. And we are taught to trust other people over ourselves. And especially when it comes to authority figures, right? And I, as you're talking about the stop being dramatic and stuff, I'm remembering when I was about 11 years old, I got sick and I had a lot of pain in my abdomen. And I was telling my family of origin that I was not okay, that I was in a lot of pain, and the response I got was that I was being a drama queen, right? Um, and I was in pain for, I think, like 5 days before they finally took me to the doctor, and my appendix was about to burst. And I had been told, oh, well, you're fine. You're just, all of these kinds of things. And I'm really glad that they finally took me and I was able to get the care that I needed. And that's not always the case in various situations. But I think it's such a common experience that we're taught to not trust our bodies. And also, there's something that happens very early on where we have a brain body disconnect. So, when you are highly sensitive and you are experiencing all of these sensations, all of these sensory things, the emotions, everything is happening, and you're not taught how to hold those experiences in a safe way, it becomes incredibly overwhelming. And there's also the aspect that many neurodivergent women have a history of trauma and abuse, right? So there are a lot of different reasons that play into why it happens. But from a very young age, there's kind of the separation that happens between the brain and body because the brain feels safer. Our mind feels safer. We feel like we have more control over things in a life where often we feel like we have no control over things. It creates a certain amount of buffer between us and the world. We're able to lean into the logic side of things. We're able to lean into the planning and the, oh, if I just think it through enough, if I just plan it right, then I can avoid the pain of failure or the pain of disappointment or whatever it is. And when we do that, all of the things are still happening in our body. We're still having the stress responses. We're still in survival state. We're still having body needs that are happening, but we're blocking them out. And so that continues to compound over time. And so when you go through the process of healing your nervous system, a big part of that is reconnecting that brain and body, being able to build up to being present with your body, being able to hear what it's telling you, being able to understand what it's telling you, and then being able to act on it and trust what it's telling you. And that those are all skills. All of those are skills that you didn't have the chance to learn when you were younger because there was no one there to help you. The only information you were getting was no, ignore that, push through. The important part is the result, not your body, not your experience. Just the outward facing experience of other people is more important than what you're experiencing internally. And so there's also a lot of trauma healing that goes into it. There's a lot of internal shadow work. There's a lot of figuring out, okay, what are those beliefs that I've been parroting back to myself without even necessarily realizing it that are keeping me stuck in these cycles where I'm continuing to stay in fight, flight, fawn, and freeze.
I love this conversation because it allows us to not only think of it differently about what we need,
But
but
also with
also
kid, like what
exactly.
do your kids need to avoid getting stuck on this one-way train to burnout, anxiety, and chronic illness?
We don't want them to experience this if we can help that from happening. And how
Yeah.
lovely it is that we are in a position where the more we understand ourselves, oftentimes the more we're going to understand where they might be coming from. Because
Yeah.
what we do too is not intentionally, but our default is to often say the same things
hmm
to our kids, like, you're fine, it's not a big deal. And we don't do it to hurt them. We do it because
No,
that's what we were told. And
that's the script we were
that's
given.
the script that comes out.
Yeah. And so, and that's something. So when I was pregnant, with my son. I had already been on like a CPTSD healing journey for about 10 years at that point. And when I was pregnant with my son, I was very sick and it was affecting my mental health so that I was also feeling very depressed because I had hyperemesis gravidarum. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but I was sick the entire time I was pregnant. And I lost 25% of my body weight being pregnant, and I was not big to start with. And so it was rough. And while I was in that state, I kept thinking about my own experiences growing up and what my mom had been like and how that had affected me. And I was so terrified and I felt so much shame because I was terrified that I was going to mess up my own kid in the same ways. And I felt shame because here I was, I couldn't even eat. My kid wasn't even born yet, and I wasn't able to get the nutrition that my body needed to be able to help my child grow. I was already failing and I hadn't even given birth yet, right? And so from that place, for me, it was really a catalyst because I was like, okay, if I'm going to change this, if I want this to be the last generation where some of this stuff happens, I need to replace it. It's not enough to avoid it, right? If you avoid something, but it's still your default setting, then when times of crisis happen or when you're in the moment, you're gonna fall back on your default setting. And so it really for me catapulted me into a journey of how do I change my default setting? How do I release these subconscious things or make it so that when I'm in the moment, I'm not falling into the pattern of just parroting or doing the same things. Because when you're exhausted and when you're tired, which is most of the time when you're a parent of young children,
Even
you
older
don't,
children,
or
even
older
older children.
children, when you're in that state, you don't have the capacity to, in the moment, filter through and think, is this actually what I want to do? Is this how I want to show up? How is this going to affect my kid? Is this different than, like
Because
all
you've
of
got your
that,
survival, your
because you're in
survival response.
survival. Exactly. Exactly. And so it's about one, being able to shift out of the survival response into a place of nervous regulation within yourself, which at that point, when I was pregnant with my son, I had almost no experiences in my life to draw from about what that might look like or feel like. It's about being able to move into that state and also having options, pre-planned options in your brain of like, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. Because one, you've got to have the options there and ready, but two, you've got to be able to regulate to access the options.
Exactly. Parents tell me this a lot. I see my child is, they're dysregulated, and I tell them to breathe, they get mad. And I said, they aren't regulated enough to access the option. And it feels like a demand. We have to turn it around and look at ourselves. What are we doing? What are we showing? And there's already so much on parents, right? Think of it this way: the work that we do for ourselves, this nervous system work, the noticing, for many of us, we are learning to care for ourselves for the very first time. That's a huge, meaningful part of breaking that cycle, because we
Yeah.
don't want our kids to live in this fight, flight, freeze, fawn cycle. We don't want that for them. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we can't control everything that's going to happen, but this is in service to the mother and the child, because we have been taught to ignore our own needs. We have been taught, when we notice our own needs, that we're wrong. We've been praised for putting everyone else first when that's
Yep.
actually a terrible
And it
thing.
becomes an identity piece,
Yes, of
right?
course.
That
Look,
it's
you're
how
so
you identify
nice.
yourself. Oh, I'm the caring person. It's a part of my core being to take care of other people. And yes, that can be true. And also, you can take care of yourself and you need to be able to take care of yourself in order to show up for others in that way. And I see that so often with I have a lot of moms who are in my one-on-one container, and one of the things that I get consistently that they're always surprised about, which is funny, but they're like, around probably the 2 or 3 month mark when they start to see some of these differences start to seep into how they're showing up for their kids. They've done some of that foundational work and now they're able to show up for their kids differently. There's the aspect of, I'm so excited, I'm able to show up and be the mom that I want to be. And then there's also the aspect of, and oh my gosh, my child is picking up on some of this stuff too. Oh my gosh, my child is being able to utilize some tools that they weren't able to utilize before, right? They're seeing the difference not only in how they show up and being able to be the mom that they've always known they could be, but just couldn't quite access, but then immediately to see such a difference. And sometimes it's little differences, but even little differences have a huge impact in these situations of their kid being able to notice or being able to be slightly more present or being able to hear something that they wouldn't have been able to hear otherwise or being able to access a tool that because I don't work with kids. I work only with the moms, only with the adults. And so for them to then see that knock-on effect, it's so powerful and so beautiful.
We have to remember we are constantly being observed, whether we think we are or not. Things that we say, just self criticism, that it feels natural because we've been criticized so often and for so long. I'm this, I'm so this, I should be. I can't believe I forgot that. All these things that we say about ourselves in front of our kids who are already getting criticism from all these different places, school, everything else. Even being more aware can be painful, but it's necessary and it is healing. Speaking about avoidance earlier, you cannot run from your past, the way you were raised and all and
Mhm.
trauma. You can't.
Because it's in your body.
It's
It's
in
held
your
in your body.
body.
It's held in your nervous system.
Mhm.
And so it really is a matter of, when the time is right, when you're ready to, doing the work in order to heal those things, in order to make space to create something new and something different than what you experienced growing up, because that lives in your body. I like to say it's not all in your mind, it's all in your body. Because it is. That's where all of that lives and that's where your nervous system is, which dictates all of these different things, including what patterns get activated, how you're showing up, whether or not you're able to access tools, like all of that is around your nervous system.
This work is important for us mentally, physically. We get to show up in ways that our children see. We get to be able to show them that we have boundaries, that it's okay to say no, which ultimately helps their safety, right?
Yep.
That it's okay to not have the energy to do something, allowing ourselves, and I love the word allow, we're allowing ourselves to feel the way we feel instead of shaming and trying to beat it down and act like it's not
Yeah.
there. Being able to tell a child instead of, don't think that way, that's negative, don't say that. It's, I'm curious about what's coming up for you. You're
Yeah.
teaching them to interact with their thoughts in that way as well. You don't have to run from them, they're coming up for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful way to help yourself as
Mhm.
a mom and also help your child at the same time. It's never too late. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful gift that you get to give yourself and
Yeah.
also those who you care about.
Yeah. And speaking to the emotion part, that's something that I work on with my adult clients and something that a lot of them go on to apply with their kids is this concept that, we're not really taught that emotions only really last for about 90 seconds when you're fully present with them. But in order for you to allow that to happen, you have to feel safe enough in your body to be fully present. And what happens is if you don't feel safe enough to fully feel the emotion, it gets stuck in your body. And your body makes a little bookmark so that you can come back to it when the time is right for you to feel it. And over time, if you're not actually able to access and process all of these, you end up with all these bookmarks that are open tabs on your computer, and they're running and they're draining your energy behind the scenes. And so part of the work that I do with my clients is one, learning the process of being able to go to the bookmark or access the feeling when it's coming and safely allow it to move through you. And I use this kind of metaphor of like a train in a tunnel, right? You want to move the train all the way through the tunnel. And if the train gets stuck, then all the trains behind it are going to get stuck. And so figuring out how to safely be present and feel that and allow it to pass through you and let it go is a skill that we're not taught, that we don't learn. And when you're able to learn that, it helps you to then teach your children how to then allow safely the emotion to pass through you so you don't get that buildup of anxiety, of these open tabs. Like that's going to drain your mental, it's going to add to your mental load. So you're not going to be able to hold on and remember as many things. It's going to drain your energy because some part of you is always trying to like, but we can't forget this. And it's going to like physically affect your physical, like all of these things get affected that we think of about neurodivergence as, oh, you have like poor memory or something. Part of that is that you have all of these open tabs that need to be closed out, right?
Depending on where you are in your journey, you can take a step
Mm-hmm.
forward and two back. But the point is, you're
Yep.
moving
Yeah.
in a direction, which is so
Yeah.
great because oftentimes we do feel stuck.
Yep.
Sometimes physically being separate from a thought because it doesn't have to eat you alive. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be center stage. But running from it isn't really going to work. Acting like it's not there, saying it's all going to be fine. That's what all builds up those tabs where you're overflowing. I was giving a visual the other day that I thought was helpful to a parent where if you fill up this cup right up to the top, you look at it sideways. It's literally overflown. It just hasn't tipped over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was describing to this parent that your child is starting their day like that.
Yeah.
Like they're already literally
They're already overflowing.
overflowing. It just hasn't spilled over. The social communication with them, noticing, telling you all these things, beautiful things we can do in therapy together,
Yep.
right? But also doing that work with yourself because you're probably right there with your cup that's almost
Yep.
completely falling over at the beginning of the day, maybe even before your feet hit the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see that show up a lot as anxiety. A lot of them wake up with dread right from the get-go. Like they struggle with that all day long and it just kind of exacerbates from there. Something that's been really interesting in my work that I was not expecting when I started going into this work is that the clients that I work with for an extended period of time in my one-on-one container, every single one of them came into working with me with anxiety, whether it was social anxiety, whether it was generalized anxiety. And by the time we're done working together, they don't really experience anxiety as a meaningful thing anymore. It's not a constant companion, it's not something that happens regularly. For most of them, they will occasionally have like pangs of anxiety, but they recognize it as messages, right? And they're able to decode the message and be like, oh, this is my body telling me that I need to do this. Or this is something that's happening that I wasn't fully recognizing or being present with, and now I can do that. But anxiety as an ongoing thing is no longer a thing for them. And I was not expecting that when I went into this work. But what it's caused me to realize is that for so many neurodivergent women, oftentimes before they get diagnosed with being neurodivergent, they get diagnosed with anxiety, right? Like so common to have that diagnosis, to be on medication, to have all of these things around the anxiety piece of it, and to recognize that for most of us, that anxiety piece of it is just a symptom of nervous system dysfunction because of all of these other things that we've been talking about. And as you heal the nervous system, that becomes not an ever present thing for you anymore.
It's true. Girls often are missed. I have a continuing education training on that, but they do get diagnosed with anxiety, depression,
Hmm.
eating disorders, all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
I'm glad that conversations like this can help move us forward. Before we end today, because you and I agree that we could talk for, I don't know, days, literally,
Yeah.
it could be like a retreat. And maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that at some point. We'll
We
collaborate.
both just sit there and talk back and forth for 8 hours or something.
I
That's a
would
lot.
love
That'd
to
be a long
have,
time.
well, no, but I would love to have a container where you and I are there. I think that'd be really cool. But thinking about the impact on your nervous system and chronic illness, and this is something that is getting more research now, thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
But we cannot act like it's not there. Girls and
Mhm.
women who are neurodivergent experience more chronic illness.
Yes.
Of course they would. We're not meant to stay
Hmm.
in a fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Rest and digest is not what we typically ever get to experience. And there's a reason why we have to, because our body and brain need it.
Not just have to. Our bodies are built to be in rest and digest the majority of the time.
Mhm.
These activated fight or flight states, they're only meant to happen for like a few minutes at a time. Is that's how our bodies developed. It's like activate this stress response so you can run from a lion and then go back to rest and digest. And instead, both because of how we experience things, how our bodies are handling things, and also because of the society and the world that we live in. And we're
Exactly.
not taught how to have energetic boundaries between ourselves and all of the things that we're being exposed to. Like, then it becomes a thing where it's completely reversed. So instead of being in rest and digest most of the time, you're in an activated state most of the time and can barely access the rest and digest. So it's the complete opposite of how our bodies and our nervous systems are built to function.
And no wonder there's so much damage.
Yeah.
No wonder everyone sees the anxiety and the depression because we
Hmm.
literally are not built to live the way that we've been living. And it wasn't because we wanted to live this way.
Yeah.
This is a great conversation of allowing yourself, like you have permission.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you need it, we're going to give it to you. You have
Yeah.
permission. Elizabeth and I are giving you permission to feel what comes to you. A lot of it's hard, and that's why we've been blocking it out, right?
Especially if you have these experiences, oftentimes you have a pattern of chronic pain in your body. And so it makes sense that you are disconnecting from what your body is experiencing. And there can be a lot of fear around reconnecting because your only experiences with being connected with your body have been painful and overwhelming. And, like you got to build up to that in a way that is sustainable and matches what your nervous system pace is. Each person is different. Some people can go faster. Some people take a long. I have people that I've worked with for 2 years before they get to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, I feel safe to actually access and process and be with my feelings. They'll have moments of it before that, but it can take a long time for that to become the default setting for some people. Whereas for other
Oh,
people, sometimes it's only like 6 months and they're there and they're like, I'm
yeah,
here. Like this is it.
it is variable. Some people might think, well, that just doesn't work for me. But I would say this doesn't work for you. You don't want your life to just be full of survival,
Yeah.
because that's also not a life that you're going to love.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, because you are so amazing. And even though we've only connected just recently, I feel that you are the person I have been waiting for
Oh.
to give myself permission to dive into my own chronic illness story that I have avoided. I have
Yeah.
avoided talking about on the podcast because it is so painful.
And personal. It's
It
so
is
vulnerable.
it's so vulnerable because I know I'm going to cry, which of course you'll be cool with, and my audience is amazing. That's going to be healing for me. I needed to have that person in order to
Yeah.
take that final step. That person is you. I am very thankful for that. So you are going to come back on the Autism ADHD podcast and interview me. It is going to be hard, and I trust you with it, and I am ready. I'm ready now.
I am so honored and it's so I'm always floored and honored by the trust and the ability for me to be a part of people's journeys. And I'm very honored that you are entrusting me with this and that I get to be this piece where you share something that is such a big part of your life, right? Like, this is something that really affects every area of life when you have chronic illness. And for you to finally open up about that and share that with your audience, it's a very big step, and I'm honored to be a part of that.
Thank you. And I feel very grateful. And I'm glad that we're able to share our own stories. And I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing yours as well. This lived experience, it is a very different way to look at another human. Again, we don't know what it's like to be in every
Yeah.
person's body and brain, but it can be incredibly helpful to have a little bit of an idea
A
because
frame of
there's a
reference.
frame of
Yeah.
reference. What's also lovely about all of this, we get a chance to help our kids honor their experience, honor their emotions, honor the information they're getting from their own bodies, because
Yeah.
we say we want them to tell us, and we do, but often they get this mixed response of, oh, it's not that bad, but this
Mhm.
hurts.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really tough as a parent to kind of navigate that.
Yeah. And
um
it's also, there's like that aspect of triggering for you when you have trauma around these things from when you were a child, even if it's not like the kind of unconscious scripted response, sometimes it can cause a really strong emotional response in you because that's what you were met with. And it might not align with what you actually believe, and it might not align with how you actually want to show up for your kid, but it can cause you to get angry and frustrated and maybe have an outburst. And then you feel shame and you're like, why did I do that? That's not how I don't believe in doing that. I don't, whatever. But it's not something that you did intentionally. It's something that was wired into your nervous system. And the only way to shift that is to do that deeper healing work.
it is. I love it. Tell everyone where they can find out more about you and your services.
Absolutely. I have a webinar, which is called How to Be Weird and Well, and it's a free webinar. And when you sign up for it, it talks a little bit more about the nervous system and how that interacts with neurodivergence and trauma and chronic illness. And also, when you sign up for that, you get added to my email list. And so, in my email list, I'm also sharing different ways to work with me, different techniques and tips. And I let you know whenever I post a new podcast episode on my Weird and Well podcast, or when I put out a new blog post, all of those kinds of things. So I'm not usually on social media much, but the best way to hear more from me is to sign up for that webinar and get on my email list.
I know a lot of people are going to be interested in learning more about you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love being able to have these conversations that are so important to our community, so important to the long-term health, not just of the women now, but also of the future generations. And I think that has a broader impact on the health of the world personally. And I love being able to have these conversations with somebody else who totally gets it and shares my special interests.
That is my favorite thing. If you haven't noticed, everyone watching or listening, we're like so excited about this. I feel the same way. Again, you're gonna be back on. We're gonna dig deep, and I'm gonna do some hard things for everyone to see and hear.
You got this, Holly.
I got it.
You
And
got
my
this.
audience is beautiful and lovely and supportive. So I think it's time.
Awesome.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And I'll see you
Absolutely.
soon.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye. If you found this podcast helpful, I greatly appreciate it if you could take a second to give it a 5-star review. With your positive feedback, I can continue bringing you free, valuable information. As an extra thanks to you for sticking around, there are special gifts waiting for you in the show notes. You'll find links to free resources on supporting neurodivergent kids, so come on down to the show notes and get your free resources. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and/or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.